a little surreal. The passage of time is strangely swift, and I feel a little like a parent of a 40-year-old who's like, how did this happen? In this metaphor, of course, I was not the only parent, nor the first parent. I certainly was a young parent. But like a parent who watches their child grow up, I am struck by both the vast changes and growth, as well as by some amazement at the core essence that remains the same or unchanged. It's just an amazement at how this field, how much of the issues that we had back then are still present. I say this also from literal experience, watching my two very different children grow up. Okay, back to some stories. At the first conference that I attended, I first met David, who came to my presentation, and I was very struck by the similarities in our paths, very excited also by the differences. And most of all, I was excited to discover that I was not alone in this field, even that there was a field. I joined the NADTA Board of Directors and served on the board for 8 years, from 1983 to 1991. I was on the very first registry committee. We were designing requirements, like what involved conversation about what did it mean to be a drama therapist. Later, I was on what I believe was the first or maybe the second education committee. I became the president after David. I was a president from 1985 to 1987, so officially I was the third NADTA president. The first conference during my presidency, which was in 1985, was an extremely exciting time. We were part of the first joint conference on creative arts therapies in CATA. And it was really fantastic to join with the other creative arts therapies, which made us move from feeling very tiny. We were then 6 years old to being part of this large coalition. I would say in general, at this point, there was a theme of joining forces, especially as we had more or less mastered the very initial years, which I think were predominated by a theme of self-definition. Who were we in relation to these other related fields? How are we different? Then, in 1986, during my presidency, I organized and chaired the first West Coast Drama Therapy Conference. I remember the board was somewhat anxious. Would East Coast people come? Would there be enough people on the West Coast? At that point in time, there were very few West Coast people who came to the early trauma therapy conferences. Let's just say I accounted for about a third of the registrants. So numbers were important, and the way it turned out was that 1986 conference in San Francisco was our largest attendance conference to date, and at that point, and actually it was very similar to the numbers that we have now. There were about 300 people coming to that conference, and people came from all over. The East Coast people came out of the woodwork on the West Coast. It wasn't that there were drama therapists, but we invited and brought together people who were in related fields. Family therapists who were doing action-oriented work, psychodramatists who were interested in what drama therapy was, autobiographical theater performers, etc. And I remember we were in this huge 8,000 square foot room overlooking the city, where Antioch, San Francisco, where I had started the West Coast first drama therapy program here, had begun a couple of years earlier. we had this great building, and in this huge space, all 300 people started the conference together with something I designed called an experiential meeting, where we ran around and met the other 300 people there, which I think impacted the rest of the weekend, which was highly collegial and energized, and people felt very welcomed and connected. The conference, in organizing the conference, I brought in not only drama therapists from around the country, but also from England, where there were drama therapists. And so Sue Jennings and Alida Gersi came and presented. Also, as I mentioned, people from related fields. We didn't have that many drama therapists, so there were autobiographical performances by people living with HIV. Theater Unlimited, which then was a theater company of developmentally disabled adults, performed. There were presentations by psychodramatists, etc. And the theme of the conference, that 1986 conference, was the impact of drama therapy on the individual, family, group, community, and society. And I designed it so that all the presentations that had to do with drama therapy with individuals were at the beginning of the conference. The next slot was with families, etc., into groups, so that there would be a sense of, for all the participants to journey through the weekend together, culminating in the impact of drama therapy on society. When I look back on this, I think, wow, I chaired the conference and organized it at the same time that I was president, but at that point in time, there weren't very many of us, and each of us had to do a lot. My focus, I would say, at that conference and during my presidency was on reaching out to drama therapists in England, to people in related fields. And this was very much, excuse me. This sense of reaching out was also true in the graduate program that I had started in 1983 at Antioch, San Francisco. We didn't have drama therapists in the Bay Area yet. So the first courses in the drama therapy program were taught by people that I could find that were closest to the field. There was a drama educator with special populations who was the director of Theater Unlimited. There was an improv teacher who was psychologically minded, a psychodramatist who was dramatically minded, a local dance therapist, and before long, a psychologist friend of mine whose focus was on multicultural counseling, but who was very taken by drama therapy. And I taught the drama therapy courses, drawing a lot on experimental theater, humanistic psychology. And most importantly, I asked David Johnson to come annually and teach a course in drama therapy. So there would be another drama therapist teaching in the program. And he did that for several decades, which was a huge help for us. My own work at that point was focused on drama therapy in psychiatric facilities with adults and adolescents, as well as working with people once they had left institutions. So a lot of the clinically oriented presentations I did at conferences were also related to that. So fortunately, the NYU program and our West Coast program, which were for a long time the only two drama therapy programs in the United States, were soon generating people trained in the field. In fact, two prominent drama therapists, Susanna Penzick and Armand Volkas, were in the second year cohort of the Antioch Drama Therapy program. Given the time that it took for me to build a strong graduate program, I served as president just for one term, though I remained on the board for many years after that. So as far as the program, which was one of my main efforts, because I felt it was imperative, both and not only for the West Coast, but for the field, to keep that program going and strong. That took a lot of effort. For one, the program began as a component of the Creative Arts Therapy program at Antioch. There was a graduate program in dance and art therapy. I was asked to start a drama therapy component in there. And as soon as I began, that creative arts therapy program folded. The two people left. The two chairs of the art and dance therapy program left. And so I quickly scrambled to get our brand new baby taken up by the psychology division, graduate psychology, counseling psychology program, and changed the curriculum accordingly. And then another challenge came a bit later when the program was 6 years old, and Antioch University decided to close several of its branches, including the San Francisco branch. Our program was only 6, but it was already thriving, and with the help of fantastic students in the program at that time, I got the program adopted. Well, first there was some scrambling to find another academic institution to adopt us intact as we were. And in the end, I had a choice of 2 institutions and chose CIS, where we have been, as you know, ever since. And the next conference during my presidency was held at NYU. And as I mentioned, for a long time, we just had the programs on both coasts, the NYU and Antioch, then CIS Drama Therapy program. But back to my presidency, during that time, a lot of people joined the organization. The attendance at conferences almost doubled, and we devised standards for approval of graduate training programs in drama therapy. As a board of directors, I would say overall we were collaborative. There were some differences and tensions too. My clear aim was for us to work together toward the future and not create factions. I certainly believe that our disagreements could be fodder for interesting and productive dialogue. And I was very focused on not letting disagreements create factions that could disrupt our constructive development. I was also very influenced by David, who was always very inclusive and committed to opening our arms to people doing related work, which I think was really critical in starting to build a body of people who would join our association, come to our conferences. David's deep and unending commitment to our association was definitely an inspiration to me. I had lots of conversations with both David and Robert. In many ways, they were my primary colleagues in the field, among other people who, of course, were on the board, like Nita Weisberg and such. I was definitely aware of the fact that we had a young, emerging field, and also and a board, all of which were predominantly women, with 2 prominent men and me in leadership positions. And I think in some ways I took on a mediator role at times. there. When I became the president of the association, I felt, on the one hand, young to be assuming this role, but it also felt very timely to have a female president. And I felt myself to be a supportive figure for our membership, which, as I say, was over 90% women. And in addition to offering speeches, I, of course, offered clinically oriented presentations at every conference. So I was looking back at Dramascope, which was our early newsletter, in which presidents wrote letters and such. And I found an excerpt of what I wrote toward the end of my presidency. It was in the fall of 1987. That speaks both about our freedom and responsibility in forging our future, and I think may well hold resonance today. So I will read that paragraph. Okay. Glasses. While we are concerned with quality and integrity, the NADT stance is nonetheless expansive, not restrictive. We need your energy, your support, your ideas. Come to the conference in New York. Continue to work with us on projects dealing with education, public affairs, legislative issues, ethical concerns, visionary ideas. Help us to reach out to the community. And here's the more interesting part, perhaps relevant. Our association, and indeed our profession, is still in process. And knowing our interest in process, we always will be. Our path is being formed as we progress. No founding father here dictating it to us. We need to move forward in our profession together, paving new ground and setting tracks for the future. I am reminded of a wonderful line from Joe Kugel's autobiographical play, Life and Depth, which he performed at last year's conference. Walker, there is no path. You make the path as you walk. Let's create our path together. So that was, again, written in fall 1987. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kate Hurd, and I was president of our organization from December 1st, 2009 through December 1st, 2011. When asked to talk about my presidency, it's hard to not wish that the president before me, which was Carlos Rodriguez Perez, and the president after me, Nisha Sajnani, could also not be present, and I will be invoking them in spirit because our board continues and we serve as a president-elect for the president before us, and so on and so forth. And a board consists of many people, not just the president, and there is so much incredible work that is done during that time, and I'm grateful for all of the people that served on the board with me during my presidency. I wanted to talk a little bit just about the responsibilities of a board, because they really have to do with financial oversight, with ensuring legal and ethical integrity, with ensuring effective organizational plans, and ensuring adequate resources. Now, this is a very large responsibility. When I came onto the board in December of 2005, I became aware that we were in the process of extracting ourselves from our relationship with our current office manager, with suspicions and later confirmations of embezzlement. So financial oversight and financial responsibility was greatly on my mind throughout the time I served on the board, which was for 8 years and which included my presidency. I'm very proud to say that through the development of better oversights during presidencies before me and boards that I was on, that there was a wonderful financial growth and increasing solvency of our organization, that we really needed to tighten up our bootstraps in some ways in order to make this happen, and that the organization now, because of the ensuing success that we had, is in a much better place than it was when I first initially started on the board. We worked on the re-accreditation process for our educational institutions, which were long overdue. We consolidated and documented the re-accreditation of New York University. That was completed during my presidency, and preliminary steps towards re-accreditation of CIIS and Concordia were also initiated, and this is many thanks to our education chair at the time, Heidi Landis. This was in terms of working on the goal of more administrative infrastructure, that we also had our website redesigned, and this was really much needed and greatly appreciated the enormous efforts of Nadia Triton, who was our communication chair at the time. There was a video shorts project, which was initiated by me, encouraging the use of drama therapy shorts as a means to increase recognition of our field. There also was the proposal for the development of a national exam. And this was something that actually caused quite a deal of discussion in our board meetings and also with our membership. And I think that there was some difference of opinion in terms of intention, what the intention of the board was and what the intention that I had in examining this proposal. It was given to the board in a way that we did not have a full proposal initially, that there was a lot to consider, not just with the exciting ideas about having a national exam and what that would mean to our organization, but this included many legal, ethical, and financial issues when it reached the implementation phase. The board, what they did was look at the exciting ideas of developing the exam and wait and hold off on the issues involving implementation. And so the board supported the development of this pilot instrument for the development of a national exam, with the PI being Paige Dickinson. This leads to also examining the values of our organization. Our ethics chair at the time, Maria Hoder-Marsker, really encouraged us to look at that, because we didn't really have a mission statement for our organization, so we began developing that during my presidency. And then what we also did was we actually approved and got our bylaws changed by the membership to change the name of our organization from the National Association of Drama Therapy to the North American Drama Therapy Organization. And this was very exciting. The necessary bylaws were passed, and then Nisha Sajnani took up the cause of how we were actually going to look at the research we had already done to legally change our name. So this was just a little bit of a brief summary of a time which consumed a lot of my life. I'm glad I did it. And I look at the organization now, and I'm really proud of any part that I played in that, and I'm really proud of all the individuals that work on a volunteer basis for our organization.
I was very excited to begin my term as president. I had dreams and visions of what NADT could become after serving on the board for many years and after having seen the possibilities. My board of directors was ready to begin, each with a specific action plan. I wanted to increase the visibility of drama therapy and NADT at conferences, events, and in the Middle East and Europe. On my first board meeting, I became aware of a significant and deeply troubling ethical matter. I owe a debt of gratitude to P.D. Subin, Ethics Chair, who with her committee made valuable recommendations as well as setting procedures and standards for the future. It was a difficult and challenging beginning. Linda Cook, President-elect, was an inspiration. Linda was New Orleans Conference Chair for 1994. She created special opportunities for students to participate and set up their own programming. Linda was a joy to work with, always supportive, present, and helpful. I was very excited about alternative training and that Pat Sternberg as education chair would be the pioneer who would move alternative training forward. I had complete confidence with her leadership that she and her committees would make an excellent proposal. The board accepted the alternative training proposal in 1995. Pat Sternberg made such a significant contribution to NADT in all her years of service and in the many hats she wore for the organization. She was a treasured friend and colleague. We were born on the same month and day, both loved dancing, and both were adventurers. I was so inspired by her dedication to high standards and her positive energy and engaging presence. I miss her very much. Don LaFoon, Vice President, offered a business model for NADT that would function in the most professional and efficient way. Toddy Richmond came to public affairs with her positive spirit and long history with NADT. Norm Fetter I had known for years and was so honored to have him serve during my term as president. There were additional board members and regional representatives who were wonderful and are listed here in these additional slides. There were also ad hoc committees, newsletter, and office manager, who I'm grateful to. So as far as NADT outreach, 1993 to 1995, there was the Exploration of Creativity Conference, and Pat Sternberg, Nina Garcia, P.D. Subin and I were there, and it was just a wonderful time. There were lots of opportunities to meet people, to talk about NADT and drama therapy, and to explore many things together in this beautiful city. Then there was the International Drama Therapy Trainers meeting at Yale University. This was a wonderful opportunity to look at training issues and to improve the quality of training. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to attend that meeting. Then there was an NADTA Board of Examiners. We were the first ones: Linda Cook, myself, Robert Landy, Toddy Richmond, and Rosalind Wilder. Then some other international scenes. I introduced drama therapy at the narrative conferences in Vancouver in 1994 and 95. And I introduced drama therapy in the Middle East in 1994 and 95. Then there were the NADT conferences, the one in New Orleans. We had a lot of fun. It was a beautiful conference. At the NADT conference in New Haven, it seemed like I just started as president and was already leaving office. I remember walking around the reception, feeling a kind of void and sadness. I wondered how I would be serving drama therapy in the future. I was happy that Linda Cook was taking over as president. I knew she would do a fantastic job. My time as president was an exciting time of growth for NADT as our organization was becoming more visible nationally and internationally. Alternative training was approved and inroads were made in government and public affairs. The ethical challenge, while difficult, helped us to grow as an organization. I really appreciated working with such fantastic and qualified people that were on the board. I want to thank NADT, now NADTA, for the opportunity to serve as president. This was a wonderful, enriching, and important part of my life that I will always treasure.
Greetings from New Orleans. I'm Linda Gregory Cook. I live here, and I served as your president from 1995 to 1997. At that time, our organization was, for all intents and purposes, in a bit of a crisis because we were small, we were young, and we were having growing pains. So, following Pam Dunn as president, we worked together to try to identify what could be done so that our organization could flourish, be recognized, and in effect be who we are today. That was not easy to do. How we started it was actually when I was president-elect, and I said, how about y'all come down to New Orleans and we'll do the conference here. And it was at that conference that I think we all agreed that we just needed to put a little joie in our step, and we needed to become more proactive. We needed to get to know each other because we were spread across the country and we were very small. So it was at that moment that we as a board decided that going forward we would identify two areas to work on. One was that we needed to find a way to increase our membership, and two, we really had to look at education because at that time we only had two formal programs. We had Robert Landy's at NYU and we had the formal program at CIIS, both of which were superb programs. But you have caps on enrollment, and you had other people from other professions who were interested in drama therapy. How on earth could they become drama therapists? So, in addition to that, and to complicate our drama a little, we had no formal office. We were a floating crap game, if you will. And we had three wonderful women who served as office managers, and I do want to recognize them. We began with Marie Woods Petiti, who had her office out of her home in Texas. We had Catherine Templeton, who followed her. And last but definitely not least, we had Alice Forrester. Those three women gave great time and attention to communicating with the board and with all of you. A little problem. When I say communicate, I mean they put a stamp on an envelope or they picked up a phone, because we didn't have the internet at that time to work with. Some of us had fax, but other than that, we were very, very handicapped and not technological. In fact, it wasn't until the year that I became president in 1995 that Joel Plotkin said, "Oh, how about I put together a web page for you?" So we had our first web page in 1995. I became president at Yale University in November 1995. And at that time, I had the great privilege of introducing to the membership the work that had gone on 6 months prior. In the fall of 1994, we proceeded to begin to put together Attention to an Alternate Training Program. And this program needed a committee, so Pam had appointed an ad hoc committee, of which I and many others were a part of that, and had Pat Sternberg as our chair. At the same time, we realized we might need to have an exam or a review committee, and so we also had a board of examiners, and Pat Sternberg was chair of that as well. The work of all of the people on that team was presented at the Yale conference. It was exciting, it was challenging, and it was, at that point, incomplete because we had to be scrutinized. We had to make sure that we presented ourselves professionally to the other professions. But at least we were on our way, and that was what was so important. We had the steady guidance of Robert Landy, who represented the formal program, and we had other people throughout the country who knew that they would never have a formal program close by. So the alternate route was something that we spent a great deal of time and attention. Now, in that first year of my presidency, it was not easy because since we had no formal office prior to that, there were some legal issues, there were some ethics problems that had come up. We were having some growing pains, as I said. And so it was at that time we decided that we needed to really get ourselves structured properly. We were represented by the President-elect, and Government Affairs to go to Washington and be part of NCADA, the National Coalition for the Art Therapies. At that meeting, we developed a fairly strong bond with dance. They too were founded in 1979. They too were trying to put together a training program. We both had some problems. We had problems with the other arts therapies because they had been around for a very long time, and their membership was more like in the thousands and in the hundreds. So at that time, Mimi Berger, who was president of dance, and we decided that we would sort of sit across from each other at these meetings, and when everything got a little bit rough, why we just sort of nudge each other and help each other out. It was wonderful because it opened our eyes to the realization that we must not do this alone. We need partners. So what happened as a result of that meeting in Washington is that dance and drama therapy decided that they would hold a joint conference. So our next annual conference was in Santa Monica, and it was going to be one that focused on crossing borders and expanding visions. We all wanted that, and that was what the conference would be about. While we were doing that at home, Pam was also doing what some others were doing. They were looking abroad. Pam had spent a great deal of time in the Middle East developing programs over there. We were taking trips to far away places to see who was doing what where. and who would make good, creative professional partners. It was also at that meeting at Yale that we identified the need for research, that unless we could prove and show outcomes, we would not be accepted or recognized. So research was put on our table as something extremely important. So that is where we were in 1995 in November. We had then gone on to the next year, and this would be in April. We met at NYU. The president-elect was Don LaFoon, and Don came from a very strong business background. And I really give him great credit for saying, we need to have structure. We need to be more business-like. And so as a result of that, he was very responsible and helpful in guiding us to find and transition into an office, a central office. It took time for that to happen, but at least we were beginning to look to what we needed to do so we could be efficient, we could communicate with each other, and more importantly, begin to be recognized so that we could work. We were armed with a lot of wonderful programs and people who had really made miracles in many places. I would like to give special call out to the Education Committee and to the Board of Examiners. There were many people involved, too long a list for me to say on camera, but I will say it was a major, major project. My main project as president, and I'm very proud of that achievement. Well, from that spring meeting at NYU, we were very excited to meet up with Dance at Santa Monica for that annual conference. It was at that time we could really advertise it because now we had a professional office. Our membership had finally grown to 328, which was short of a miracle, but we loved it. It was going up. And then something happened. It happened in Washington that gave us all pause. The problem was we had to struggle and really stand tall for our training program because we found that the older arts organizations, and I would include regular arts ed organizations as well, really did not want to recognize drama therapy and the healing part of what we do, the power of our work. So getting our professional identity became a major, major challenge for that second year of my term as president. That affected our scope of practice because every state has certain licensing laws, and those on the East Coast and West Coast, where most of our members resided, found that they had friends, but they also had foes, and that fight became quite difficult. We really had to prove that what we were doing worked and it was being handled professionally. Our board time was spent a great deal discussing that. Well, along comes technology riding to our rescue, and at that point we had the internet. And the internet gave us the possibility of email, so now we could really communicate faster. And by having that as something we could do, it did make a tremendous difference to how we could go forward. Our next board meeting was held at NYU the following April in 1997. By then, we had our new office really working well. Our financial house was in order, and we had a very strong organizational structure. In addition to that, it took a number of revisions, but we had published our very first alternative training program booklet in which all the procedures and all of the ways in which you could become an RDT and a BCP is found in this booklet. We also were involved with doing more outreach, not just going to Washington. We had a really incredible opportunity to go to the Menninger Clinic. And for that, I'm very grateful to Linnell Finnernan. Linnell Finnernan was one who was connected with Kansas State University and working with Dr. Norman Fetter, arranged for us to have a Central Region Conference at the Menninger Clinic. And that was the first of what would grow to become many regional conferences, where we could talk together, we could worry together, and we could grow together. That fall in 1997, I had the pleasure of going to London with the two people that I would like to recognize as my dear friends and colleagues who inspired me in many different ways. They were the strong anchors to the organization for many years. Pat Sternberg and Robert Landy. Pat is no longer with us, but I know many of you know her. She probably trained you. She was a professor at Hunter College. And to this day, you will hear her name. We went and presented at ACART in London and again made many international connections. This is what we had to do. We could not stay so locked into our own little group of people. By working together and finding people we could partner with, that was how our organization could grow. It's very interesting in putting together my thoughts because I felt at the end of that term that we had come a very long way. And then I looked at what I wrote for the conference in 1994, which would have been 25 years ago. And this is what I wrote, and it gave me pause. In looking toward the future of what we need to do, and I wrote, if we are to meet the needs and challenges of the 90s, we must continue to break down barriers, enter uncharted territories, and create new partnerships. If I had to write today what my advice to you all would be, the only difference that I would say is we need to meet the challenges of today, and they're still the same. How we achieve and meet them are totally different. You're a new generation, new pioneers. And now we pass it on to you to see how you can grow our profession. And as they would say in New Orleans, laissez le bon temps rouler. Let the good times roll. Thank you.
Happy anniversary, NADTA. I'm so excited to be here today, only by video. I wish I was there in person. It's 40 years. I was just thinking that when I was president, we were celebrating our 20th anniversary. So a lot of time has passed.